Welcome back to ShadeVault. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 disturbing stories from the Pennsylvania wilderness. These are tales of people who ventured into forgotten hollows and abandoned homesteads and found something they were never meant to see. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. The property came to me through my uncle's estate, which felt strange because I'd only met him twice. 140 acres in Center County, mostly wooded, with a hunting cabin my grandfather built in 1962. The lawyer said my uncle hadn't visited in 15 years. When I asked why, she just shrugged and slid the deed across her desk. I was between jobs that November, so I figured I'd spend a week up there. Clear my head. Maybe fix whatever was keeping my uncle away, sell it to some hunter looking for a permanent blind. The drive from Harrisburg took 3 hours, the last 40 minutes on roads that weren't really roads anymore, just suggestions of where cars used to go. My coffee had gone cold by the time I found the turnoff. I remember that specifically because I took a sip and it tasted like rust. I'd been meaning to replace the travel mug for months. The driveway, if you could call it that, was 2 ruts through pin oaks and hemlocks, branches scraping both sides of my truck. The cabin appeared suddenly, like it had been waiting just out of sight. It was smaller than I expected. Single room, maybe 20 by 20, with a covered porch that sagged on one side. The windows were intact, which surprised me. The door was locked, but the key the lawyer gave me still worked. Inside smelled like mouse droppings and damp wood and something else I couldn't place. Wet leather, maybe. Or mushrooms. I spent the first day just cleaning, sweeping out decades of leaves and dirt, wiping down surfaces, checking for rot. The cabin was solid. My grandfather knew what he was doing. There was a wood stove, a narrow bed with a bare mattress, a table with 2 chairs. One window faced east toward a clearing. The other 3 looked into trees so thick I couldn't see more than 30 feet in any direction. That first night, I heard something walking around the cabin. Heavy steps, but irregular, like whatever it was kept stopping to listen. I told myself it was a deer. Black bears were common in Center County, but this was November. They should be denning up. I lay there in my sleeping bag, listening to it circle. It never came on to the porch. It never made any sound except those footsteps. Sometime after midnight, it stopped. In the morning, I checked for tracks. The ground was soft from recent rain, perfect for prints. I found them easily enough. I just wish I hadn't. They looked almost like handprints pressed into the mud. 4 long marks where fingers would be, a separate mark for a thumb. But they were huge, each one bigger than my whole hand, and they walked upright, one after another in a straight line, circling the cabin exactly where I'd heard the footsteps. I tried to tell myself it was a bear. Sometimes they leave tracks that look weirdly human. But these weren't like that. The spacing was wrong. A bear walking on its hind legs wouldn't take such even, measured steps. And the finger marks were too defined, too deliberate. I decided to spend the day exploring the property. Get away from the cabin, clear my head. Maybe I'd just been spooked by being alone in the woods. I followed an old trail that started behind the cabin and wound northeast through a section of forest where the trees grew so close together it felt like walking through a tunnel. The trail was marked with faded orange paint on the trunks. My grandfather's work, probably. About a mile in, the trail opened into another clearing. This one had a structure. Not a cabin, more like a shed, but half collapsed. The door hung by one hinge. I remember the wind made it creak, and the sound set my teeth on edge. I almost turned back. I don't know why I didn't. Inside, there wasn't much. Rotted shelves, broken glass, leaves piled in the corners. But on the back wall, someone had hung something. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. Thin branches woven together with what looked like wire, making a kind of frame. And hanging from it, suspended by more wire, were bones. Small ones. Birds. Maybe rabbits. They'd been cleaned perfectly white. Between them, someone had tied scraps of fabric. Red, mostly faded to brown. The whole thing swayed slightly in the breeze coming through the walls. I left the shed. I tried to walk calmly, but by the time I hit the tree line, I was running. I didn't stop until I reached the cabin. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. That night I heard my name. I'd been lying there for maybe an hour, listening to the wind in the trees, trying to convince myself the bone and wire thing was just some weird hunter's charm. Then I heard it. Daniel. Clear as anything. A woman's voice, coming from just outside the east window. "Daniel, are you there?" It was my mother's voice. Exactly her voice. Not similar, not close. Her. The same slight rasp she'd had after years of smoking. I felt my whole body go cold. My mother had been dead for 6 years. "Daniel, I need you to open the door." I didn't move. Couldn't move. The voice was patient, almost gentle. "Daniel, it's cold out here. Please open the door." I heard footsteps on the porch. That same heavy, irregular rhythm from the night before. The doorknob rattled. Once, twice, then nothing. Just silence so complete it felt like the forest was holding its breath. I sat on that bed until dawn. My grandfather's hunting knife in my hand, even though I knew, somehow I knew, that a knife wouldn't matter. In the morning, there were more prints, all around the cabin, pressed deep into the mud, but now there were drag marks too, like something heavy had been pulled across the ground. They led from the porch into the trees, disappearing into the underbrush. I should have left then. Packed my truck and driven back to Harrisburg and never thought about that property again. But I was angry. This was my land, my inheritance. I had a right to be here. I followed the drag marks. They led back to the shed, but this time I noticed what I'd missed before. There were more of those bone wire frames. Dozens of them, hanging from branches around the clearing, some so overgrown with moss and vines I'd walked right past them. They formed a rough circle around the collapsed shed, and in the center, where the drag marks ended, was a space in the ground. Not quite a hole, more like a gap between roots where something had been digging. The earth was freshly turned. I knelt down, trying to see into the darkness. That's when I smelled it. That same wet leather smell from inside the cabin, but stronger. It was coming up from the gap, and mixed with it was something else. Something rotten. Something moved down there. I didn't see it clearly. Just a flash of pale skin and too many joints bending in wrong directions. But I heard it. A wet, clicking sound, like bones sliding over bones. I ran. This time I didn't stop to close the cabin door behind me. I threw my sleeping bag and backpack in the truck bed and drove, branches snapping against the hood, not caring about the scratches. The whole way down that rutted driveway, I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see something following. But there was only trees. I never went back. I had a realtor list the property from the photos the county had on file. It took 2 years to sell. The buyer was some company that wanted the timber rights. I don't know if they ever found the shed or the bone wire frames or that gap in the ground. I don't want to know, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear my mother's voice. "Daniel," it says, so soft I can almost convince myself I'm imagining it. "Daniel, are you there?" And I know somehow that something followed me home. Not in my truck, but in something deeper. Like I brought part of that forest back with me, and now it's waiting. Last month, I found something on my apartment doorstep. A piece of bark with a carving in it. 4 long marks and a thumb. Just like the prints around the cabin. No note, no explanation. Just that. I moved the next week, but I don't think it matters. Story 2. My cousin Teresa called me in March and said she'd inherited a house. Not a nice house, our great-aunt's place in Pike County, way up near the Delaware Water Gap. Teresa had been there once as a kid and said it gave her nightmares for months. But it was free and she was broke and she wanted someone to go with her for the weekend to clean it out. She offered me $200 in free bear. I said yes. The house sat at the end of a dirt road that wound up into the hills. It was one of those old Pennsylvania farmhouses, white paint peeling, front porch rotting in places. Behind it, the land sloped up into thick forest. Our great-aunt had lived alone up there for 40 years after her husband died. No neighbors within 2 miles. When I asked Teresa how the old woman had managed, she just said she was tough. We arrived Friday evening, the sun already low. Teresa had a key, but the door was stuck. The frame had warped. We had to put our shoulders into it. Inside smelled like old newspapers and heating oil. The furniture was all from the 70s, orange and brown and covered in that plasticky fabric that crackles when you sit on it. There were photographs on every surface. Our great-aunt staring at the camera with this expression that wasn't quite a smile, always standing in front of this house, always alone. We spent the first hour just opening windows, trying to air the place out. The house had 2 floors, living room, kitchen, and bathroom downstairs, 3 bedrooms upstairs. Teresa took the bedroom at the front. I got the one that faced the woods. There was a 3rd bedroom, but when we opened the door, we both just looked at each other and closed it again. It was completely empty except for scratches on the floor. Deep gouges in the hardwood, radiating out from the center of the room like something had been spinning there. That night we ordered pizza and drank beer and made plans for the next day. We'd go through the downstairs, box up anything worth keeping, haul the rest to the dump. Teresa fell asleep on the couch around 11. I went upstairs, too tired to feel nervous about the scratch floor room just down the hall. I woke up to tapping. It was rhythmic, patient. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Coming from the window. I checked my phone, 2:47 a.m. The tapping continued. I told myself it was a branch, just wind pushing it against the glass. But when I finally got up and looked, there were no branches. The nearest tree was at least 15 feet away, and there, on the outside of the window, pressed against the glass, was a handprint. Not small, not a child's hand. Adult-sized, fingers spread wide, but wrong somehow. The proportions weren't right. The palm was too narrow, the fingers too long, and it was there on the 2nd-floor window, 20 feet above the ground. I backed away from the glass. The tapping stopped. I stood there in the dark, listening to Teresa snoring downstairs, and I felt my skin crawl. Whatever had made that print hadn't left. I could feel it watching me. In the morning, I went outside to check. The ground beneath my window was hard-packed dirt. No footprints, no ladder leaning against the house, no explanation. Teresa said I'd probably dreamed it, but she said it too quickly, like she wanted to believe it herself. We started going through the house. Most of it was junk. Old magazines, broken appliances, dishes no one would want. But in the kitchen, Teresa found something. A journal, tucked into a drawer beneath some dish towels. Our great-aunt's handwriting, entries going back years. Most of it was mundane. Weather reports, what she'd eaten, complaints about her joints. But then Teresa flipped to an entry from 15 years ago, and her face went pale. "Listen to this," she said. "It came to the window again last night. I told it to leave, but it won't listen. I think it's getting bolder. I need to keep the upstairs door closed. Never go into the back bedroom after dark. These are the rules, and they have kept me safe." There were more entries like that. Short, clipped sentences about keeping doors closed, not answering when it called, never looking directly at it. Our great-aunt had been living with something in this house. Something that tapped on windows and left handprints and came into the back bedroom, the one with the scratched floor. Teresa wanted to leave. I should have agreed. But I kept thinking about the journal, about our great-aunt living here for 40 years, alone with whatever this was. If she could survive it, we could handle one more night. We made rules. Stay together. Keep all the doors closed. Don't go into the back bedroom. If we heard anything, we'd ignore it. The tapping started at midnight. This time it wasn't just my window, it was all of them. Moving around the house, methodical and patient. Tap, tap, tap on my window, then Teresa's, then downstairs, then back up. We sat together in my room, the door locked, listening to it circle. Then Teresa grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" Under the tapping there was another sound. Footsteps, inside the house, in the hallway, right outside my door. Slow, heavy steps. They stopped at my door. The handle rattled. "Don't open it," Teresa whispered. I hadn't been planning to. We sat there, frozen as the handle rattled again. Then the footsteps moved away, down the hall, to the back bedroom. The door opened. We heard it clearly, the creak of hinges that hadn't been oiled in years. Then came a sound I can't describe properly. Scraping, like something being dragged across the floor. Round and round, following those scratches we'd seen. Faster and faster, until it sounded like whatever was in there was spinning. Then it stopped. Complete silence. Teresa was crying without making any sound. Tears just running down her face. I had my phone in my hand, ready to call 911, even though I knew no one would get here in time. The footsteps came back, out of the back bedroom, down the hall. They stopped at my door again, and then, I swear to God, something pressed against the door. Not a hand. The whole thing bowed inward slightly, like a huge weight was leaning on it. The wood creaked. A voice came through, our great-aunt's voice. "Why won't you let me in? This is my house." Teresa made a sound like she was choking. I grabbed her, pulled her toward the window. I was thinking we could climb down somehow, jump if we had to. But when I looked out, I saw it. Standing at the edge of the tree line, pale in the moonlight, shaped like a person but too tall, proportions all wrong. Arms hanging too low, and its head was turning back and forth, like it was searching. I yanked the curtain closed. We stayed in that room until dawn. The pressure against the door eventually released. The footsteps faded. When the sun came up, we opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty. The back bedroom door was closed. We left everything. Didn't pack, didn't take our clothes, just got in Teresa's car and drove. She called a junk removal company from the road, told them to empty the entire house, and she didn't care what they did with it all. She sold the property 3 weeks later to a developer who planned to tear it down. But here's the thing. Last week, Teresa called me. She'd been going through some old family photos and found one she'd never seen before. Our great-aunt standing in front of the house, but in the background, in the upstairs window, the one to the back bedroom, there was something. Blurry, but definitely there. A pale shape with arms too long. The photo was dated 1987, 35 years ago, and Teresa said she'd been hearing tapping at her apartment window. She's on the 4th floor. Story 3, I was doing field research for my forestry degree, documenting old-growth stands in Lycoming County. The state forest there has sections that haven't been cut since before the Civil War. My professor, Dr. Henriksen, said if I wanted to impress the graduate committee, I should spend a week out there taking samples and measurements. He gave me coordinates for a section deep in the state game lands, said there were hemlocks there that were pushing 400 years old. I drove up on a Tuesday in late September. The dirt access road ended at a small parking area, just gravel and a couple of posts. From there, it was a 6-mile hike to the study area. I had a tent, a week's worth of freeze-dried food, and enough battery packs to keep my phone and GPS charged. Cell service was non-existent, but I had a satellite beacon for emergencies. I'm telling you this so you understand. I wasn't some unprepared idiot. The hike in was beautiful. Sun filtering through the canopy, that smell of moss and decay, that means you're in real forest, not the secondary growth most people think of as wilderness. I saw a pileated woodpecker and some deer tracks, and for the first few hours I felt like I'd made the right choice coming out here. The study area was a hollow, a low spot where water collected and created this perfect microclimate for hemlocks. They were massive, trunks 4 feet across, rising up like columns in a cathedral. I set up my tent on a flat section near a creek, got my equipment organized, and made dinner while it was still light. By the time I crawled into my sleeping bag, I was exhausted in a good way. The sound woke me up. At first I thought it was the creek. Water has a way of playing tricks on your ears at night. But this wasn't water. It was rhythmic, regular, like someone drumming on wood. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. I checked my watch. 3:17 a.m. I lay there listening, trying to place the direction. It seemed to be coming from deeper in the hollow, where the hemlocks were thickest. I told myself it was a woodpecker. Never mind that woodpeckers don't drum at night. It was easier than considering alternatives. The sound went on for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped. I didn't fall back asleep. In the morning, I tried to find where the sound had come from. I walked in the direction I thought I'd heard it, taking a GPS reading so I could find my way back. About 200 yards from my camp, I found something. 3 hemlocks growing in a perfect triangle, maybe 20 feet apart. Between them, someone had stretched wire, not modern wire. This stuff was old, rusted, probably hand-forged. It connected the trees in straight lines, making a triangle pattern, and hanging from the wire were pieces of bark. Each piece had been carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Spirals, lines, things that might have been letters in a language I'd never seen. I took photos. Told myself it was interesting, historically significant maybe. Some old logging ritual or indigenous marking system. But my hands were shaking when I worked the camera. I spent the day taking samples, measuring trees, doing the work I'd come to do, but I kept thinking about that triangle of wire and bark. And I kept feeling like I was being watched. You know that sensation, like pressure on the back of your neck. Every time I'd turn around, there was nothing, just trees. That night, the drumming started earlier. Midnight, maybe. Same rhythm, but louder and closer. I sat up in my tent, my headlamp ready, but not wanting to turn it on. The drumming went on for what felt like an hour. Then it stopped, and I heard footsteps. Slow and heavy, crunching through leaves, circling my tent, around and around, never changing pace. I counted 7 complete circles before they stopped. Right in front of my tent door, I held my breath. Listened. Nothing. Just the creak and the wind in the hemlocks. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Finally, I unzipped the tent. Fast, like ripping off a bandage. Nothing outside, no footprints in the soft ground, but 20 feet away on the trail leading to the wire triangle, there was something. A stick propped upright in the dirt, and balanced on top of it, a piece of bark with those same carved symbols. It hadn't been there when I'd gone to bed. The next morning, I decided to pack up. Tell Dr. Henriksen I'd gotten sick, cut the trip short. I didn't care about the graduate committee anymore. I started breaking down my tent, rolling up my sleeping bag. That's when I heard it. My name. Connor! A man's voice, coming from the direction of the wire triangle. Connor, are you there? It was my father's voice. He'd been dead for 3 years, heart attack in his driveway. But that was him. The same slight accent from growing up in Scranton. The way he'd always said my name, emphasis on the first syllable. Connor, I need you to come here. I want to show you something. I stood there, sleeping bag in my hands, and I felt tears running down my face, because part of me, some stupid, desperate part, wanted it to actually be him. Wanted to follow that voice into the trees and find him waiting there. "Connor, please. It's important." I grabbed my pack. Didn't finish packing. Didn't take down the tent. Just grabbed what I could and started walking, away from the voice, back toward the access road. I was running by the time I hit the trail, my pack bouncing on my shoulders, branches whipping across my face. Behind me, I heard footsteps, keeping pace with me, always just out of sight. And the voice kept calling, "Connor, don't leave. Connor, where are you going?" I ran for 4 miles before I had to stop, my lungs burning. I leaned against a tree, gasping. The footsteps had stopped. The voice was gone. Just forest sounds. Birds, wind, the distant sound of water. I made it back to my car by mid-afternoon, threw my pack in the back and drove, hands locked on the wheel, not stopping until I hit Williamsport. I never went back for my tent or the rest of my gear. Told Dr. Henriksen I'd lost the data, equipment malfunction. He was disappointed but understanding. I changed my focus to urban forestry. Now I study trees in parks, places with people around, but sometimes I'll be walking through a forest near my apartment and I'll hear it. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap, tap. And I'll leave, quickly, without looking back. Last week I found something in my mailbox, a piece of bark wrapped in newspaper. When I unwrapped it, I saw those symbols carved into it, the same ones from the wire triangle. I burned it immediately. But I think it's too late. I think whatever was in those hemlocks knows where I am now, and one of these nights I'm going to hear my name again, and I'm not sure I'll be able to stop myself from answering. Story 4. The job was simple. I was a plumber, and the client was a guy named Mr. Bridger who'd just bought a property in Bradford County. Old farmhouse, hadn't been occupied in a decade, and he wanted someone to come out and assess whether the pipes were salvageable before he started renovations. He offered me $1,200 for 2 days of work. I said yes without asking many questions. The drive took most of a morning. The property was so far back in the hills, I lost GPS signal 3 times. Mr. Bridger met me there. Older guy, maybe 60, wearing a suit that looked ridiculous out in the middle of nowhere. He showed me around the property, talking about his vision for the place. "Bed and breakfast," he said. "People would pay good money to get away from everything." I didn't tell him what I was thinking, which was that there was a difference between away from everything and isolated in a way that makes your skin crawl. The house was typical for the area. 2 stories, wood siding that needed paint, a stone foundation that had been repaired so many times it looked like patchwork. Mr. Bridger left me to it. He was driving back to Scranton for the night. Said he'd check in with me tomorrow. I'd be staying in the house, sleeping bag on the floor of what used to be the living room. I started in the basement. Had to be thorough, check every joint and connection. The stairs creaked so badly I thought they might collapse. The basement was mostly dirt floor with a few sections of old concrete. The pipes were a mess, mix of copper, galvanized steel, and even some lead that should have been replaced 50 years ago. I spent the afternoon taking notes, snapping photos with my phone. It was down there that I found the door. Not a door to outside, a door in the foundation wall. Small, maybe 4 feet tall, like something meant for access to a crawl space. It was held shut with a chain and padlock, both so rusted I could probably have broken them with a hammer. There was something carved into the door. Words, rough and uneven like someone had used a knife or a screwdriver. "Stay out." I'm not an idiot. I left it alone. By the time I finished the basement assessment, it was getting dark. I made dinner, instant ramen heated over a camp stove, and settled in for the night. The house made sounds, but all old houses do. I'd done jobs like this before. The isolation didn't bother me. Around 9 p.m. I heard something under the floor, scratching, like fingernails on wood. Moving across the living room directly beneath where I was sitting. I stood up, listening. The scratching stopped, then started again, in a different spot. Under the couch now, then over by the window. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the basement door. I didn't want to go down there, but I needed to know. Maybe an animal had gotten in, a raccoon or something. I opened the door slowly, shined my light down the stairs. The scratching stopped. I went down, checked the whole basement, looked for gaps in the foundation where something could get in, found nothing. The space was sealed tight, except for that small door with a chain. I walked over to it, put my ear against the wood. Listened. At first, nothing. Then, so faint I almost missed it. I heard breathing, slow and wet, like someone with a chest cold. I backed away, went upstairs, told myself it was pipes. Old houses have air pockets in the plumbing that can sound like breathing. It wasn't a perfect explanation, but it was better than the alternative. I tried to sleep, got maybe an hour before the scratching started again. This time it was directly beneath my sleeping bag. I lay there, frozen, feeling vibrations through the floor. Then I heard a voice. "Let me out," muffled, coming from below. A man's voice, hoarse and desperate. "Please, let me out." I grabbed my sleeping bag, my pack, and went upstairs to one of the bedrooms. The voice followed me. Through the floor, through the walls. "Let me out. Please. I've been here so long." I sat in that bedroom until dawn, my back against the door, listening to it beg. By the time the sun came up, it had gone silent. Mr. Bridger showed up around 10 a.m., coffee in hand, asking about my assessment. I told him the pipes were shot. Whole system needed to be replaced. I didn't mention the door or the voice. I just wanted to get paid and leave. But he could tell something was wrong. Kept asking if I was feeling okay, if something had happened. Finally, I asked him about the house's history. Who owned it before? Why had it been empty so long? He got quiet. Then he said, the previous owner had a brother. Lived here with him. The brother disappeared about 12 years ago. Police searched everywhere, never found him. I felt my stomach drop. What was his name? Marcus. Marcus Stillwell. Why? I didn't answer. I finished my notes, took my check, and drove away. I didn't look back, but here's what I can't stop thinking about. That door with the chain, the words carved into it. Stay out. Not keep out. Not danger. Stay out. Like someone was warning people not to let something out. And the breathing I heard. The voice. What if it wasn't human? What if Marcus Stillwell went down there and found something behind that door and it took him? What if what I heard was something using his voice, trying to trick me into opening it? 3 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, there was just breathing, that same wet, labored sound. And then a voice, faint and distorted. "Why didn't you let me out?" I blocked the number. But I still get calls sometimes. Different numbers, always the same message, and I know somehow that whatever is behind that door is still there. Still waiting, still calling out to anyone who gets close enough to hear. Mr. Bridger stopped returning my emails. I tried to warn him, sent him a message telling him not to go in the basement, not to touch that door. I never got a response. Last week I drove past the property, just to see. The house was still there, but there was crime scene tape across the front door, and the basement windows were broken, like something had smashed through them from the inside. I didn't stop. I kept driving. Story 5. My friend Jenna had been planning this trip for months. 7 of us, 3 days in Rothrock State Forest, hiking and camping and getting away from our phones. It was supposed to be fun. Jenna had done the route before with her family, said the trails were easy and the campsites were perfect. We left on a Friday morning in early October, the air crisp and the leaves just starting to turn. The hike in was exactly what you'd expect. Pretty views, clear trail markers, everyone in high spirits. We reached the first campsite by afternoon, a clearing near a stream, fire ring already set up. We pitched our tents, gathered wood, made dinner. Wyatt brought a guitar. Alicia brought whiskey. For a while, everything was perfect. Jenna's boyfriend, Marcus, was the one who noticed the cairns. We were sitting around the fire, passing the whiskey, when Marcus stood up and walked to the edge of the clearing. "Hey, what are these?" he called. We followed him. Just past the tree line, someone had built cairns, stacks of flat rocks balanced carefully on top of each other. There were 5 of them in a rough line, each about 2 feet tall. They didn't look old. The rocks were still clean, no moss or lichen. Trail markers, maybe, Alicia suggested. But we were nowhere near a trail. And the cairns didn't point in any particular direction. They just stood there, silent and deliberate. Jenna said we should knock them down, that it was bad luck to leave them, but nobody wanted to touch them, and eventually we went back to the fire. I remember thinking it was weird how everyone got quiet after that. Like seeing the cairns had broken some spell. That night, I woke up to voices. Not our group. These were coming from outside the tents, from somewhere in the trees. Multiple voices, overlapping, all speaking at once. I couldn't make out words, just this constant murmur. I unzipped my tent slowly, looked out. The fire had died to embers, and in the dim red glow I could see shapes moving between the trees. They were tall and thin, and they moved wrong. Too smooth, like they were gliding rather than walking. I counted 3 of them before I zipped the tent shut and lay there, my heart hammering, waiting for someone else to wake up and confirm I wasn't hallucinating. In the morning, nobody mentioned anything. I asked if anyone had heard voices during the night. They all said no, looked at me like I'd been drinking too much. But when we broke camp and started hiking, I noticed Marcus kept looking over his shoulder. The trail that day took us deeper into the forest, following a ridgeline. The trees were older here, bigger. The canopy blocked so much light it felt like dusk even though it was noon. We were supposed to reach the second campsite by 3 p.m., but by 4 we were still hiking. By 5, Jenna admitted she wasn't sure where we were. The trail markers had disappeared, or maybe we'd missed a turn. Jenna kept checking her map, her GPS, but nothing matched up. Wyatt suggested we backtrack, but we'd been walking for hours, and none of us wanted to admit we were lost. Then we found the clearing. It opened up suddenly, a perfect circle, maybe 50 feet across. And in the center was a structure, not a building, more like a frame. Wooden posts driven into the ground in a circle, connected at the top with more wood, creating a dome shape. And hanging from the frame were things. Bones, definitely. Feathers. Strips of bark covered in symbols. The whole thing swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel. Nobody spoke. We just stood there at the edge of the clearing, staring at this thing that had no business being in a state forest in central Pennsylvania. Marcus was the first to break. "We need to leave. Now." We tried. We turned around and started walking, following what we thought was the trail we'd come in on. But after 20 minutes, we were back at the clearing, the exact same clearing, the bone frame still swaying in its impossible wind. Alicia started crying. Jenna kept insisting there was a logical explanation. We'd just gotten turned around. But I could see the fear in her eyes. We tried again. Different direction this time, and 30 minutes later, we were back. By the time the sun started setting, we'd tried 5 times. Every path led us back to the clearing. It was like the forest was folding in on itself, trapping us. We had no choice but to set up camp. Nobody wanted to sleep in the clearing, so we set up tents just outside the tree line. We didn't make a fire. We just sat there in the dark, listening to the forest. The voices started at midnight, louder than before, coming from all around us, and now I could make out words. Names. Not our names, other names, dozens of them called out in desperate whispers. "Sarah, help me. Where are you?" The voices overlapped, created this awful chorus that made my skull ache. Then something stepped out of the trees. I saw it clearly in the moonlight. It was shaped like a person, but its proportions were wrong. Arms too long, hanging past its knees. Legs bent backward at the knees like a bird's. Its head was round and smooth, no features except two dark holes where eyes should be. It moved toward the clearing, toward the bone frame, and as it walked, the voices got louder. More of them came. 3, 4, 5. All identical, all moving with that same backward-jointed walk. They gathered around the frame and they started to hum, a low, resonant sound that made my teeth vibrate. I heard Marcus throw up. Alicia was sobbing openly now. Wyatt was praying, words I couldn't understand. And Jenna was staring at the things with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Pure animal terror. The humming stopped. One of the things turned its head toward our tents, that smooth, eyeless face pointing directly at us. Then it spoke, and its voice was my voice. "Come here," it said, using my voice, my exact tone. "It's safe." Another one spoke, using Jenna's voice. "We should go. We should see what it is." They were trying to lure us out, using our own voices against us. I grabbed Jenna's hand, held her tight. "Don't listen," I whispered. "It's not us." The thing stood there for what felt like hours, calling to us in our voices. When we didn't respond, they started using other voices. Parents, siblings, friends. People we loved. The psychological torture of hearing my dead grandmother call my name, begging me to come help her, was almost more than I could take. Then suddenly, they stopped. The clearing went silent. The things turned and walked back into the trees, disappearing between the trunks. We didn't sleep. We sat in our tents until dawn, holding each other, too terrified to speak. When the sun came up, the bone frame was gone. Just empty clearing, grass trampled in a circle where it had been. And 50 feet away, we found the trail. Clear orange markers, exactly where they should be. We hiked out in silence. It took 4 hours. Nobody talked about what we'd seen. When we reached the parking area and our cars were there, waiting exactly where we'd left them, Alicia started laughing, hysterical, gasping laughter that turned into sobs. We haven't spoken since that trip. I tried calling Jenna a few weeks later, but she didn't answer. Marcus changed his number. The group chat we used to plan the trip has been silent for months. But sometimes, late at night, I hear my own voice calling to me. "Come here," it says. "It's safe." And I know that if I ever go back into those woods, I'll find the clearing again. I'll find the bone frame. And this time, I won't be able to walk away. Last night, I found a small pile of rocks on my doorstep. 5 flat stones stacked carefully. A cairn. I knocked it down. But this morning, it was back. Story 6. The logging company I worked for sent me to assess a tract of land in Tioga County. Private property, owner wanted to sell the timber rights. But first, someone needed to go in and determine what was worth cutting. I'd been doing this kind of work for 8 years. Walk the property, tag trees, estimate board feet. Usually took a couple of days depending on the acreage. This property was 260 acres, heavily forested, no road access beyond the first mile. The owner, a woman named Mrs. Calloway, met me at the gate. She was elderly, maybe 80, and she had this way of looking at me like she was measuring whether I'd be able to handle what I was about to see. "My husband bought this land in 1967, she said. "We never did anything with it. He wanted to, but—" She trailed off, staring into the trees. "You'll be staying out there." I nodded. I had a tent, supplies for 3 days. "Don't stay near the old well," she said. And if you hear someone calling for help, don't answer. Just leave. I thought she was getting confused, maybe showing early signs of dementia. I thanked her for the advice and started hiking in. The forest was beautiful. Mature oaks and maples, some cherry that would fetch good prices. I spent the first day working the southern section of the property, tagging trees, taking notes. Found some evidence of old logging, cut stumps from maybe the 40s, roads that had grown over. By the time I set up camp that evening, I'd had a productive day. I didn't find the well until the second day. It was in a low spot, surrounded by birch trees. Stone construction, maybe 4 feet across, with an iron grate covering the opening. The grate was padlocked. There was no rope, no bucket, just that locked grate and darkness below. I knelt next to it, shined my flashlight down. The light didn't reach bottom, but I could hear water far below. And something else. A sound like wind through a cave. Except there was no wind. I stood up, feeling uneasy for reasons I couldn't articulate. Mrs. Calloway's warning came back to me. Don't stay near the old well. I moved my camp a 1/4 mile away, to a ridge above the well site. That night I heard it. A voice, distant and echoing. Help me, please, someone help me. It was coming from the direction of the well. A man's voice, desperate and afraid. My first instinct was to grab my flashlight and go help. But I remembered Mrs. Calloway's other warning. If you hear someone calling for help, don't answer. I stayed in my tent. The voice called out maybe a dozen more times over the next hour. Then it stopped. In the morning, I convinced myself it had been my imagination. Stress, isolation, the power of suggestion after Mrs. Calloway's weird warnings. I continued my assessment, working the northern section of the property, but I kept thinking about that well. Who had built it? Why was it locked? And what had I heard last night? Around noon I found something else. A gravestone. It was small, barely 2 feet tall, half covered in moss. The inscription was worn, but still legible. Samuel Weaver, 1843-1871, may he rest in peace. And below that, forgive us. There was no church nearby, no cemetery, just this single stone in the middle of the forest. I took a photo, made a note to ask Mrs. Calloway about it. I should have left then. Packed up my gear and hiked back to my truck. But I'd promised a full assessment, and I still had maybe 40 acres left to survey. Professional pride kept me there. That second night, the voice came back, but this time it was different. This time it was my brother's voice. Ryan, it called. Ryan, are you there? I need help. My brother lived in Pittsburgh. He was fine. I'd talked to him 3 days ago, but hearing his voice out here in the middle of nowhere made my blood run cold. Ryan, please, I'm hurt. I need you. I opened my tent, against every instinct telling me not to, looked out into the darkness. I could see the glow of the well through the trees, except that didn't make sense because there was no light source there. But it was glowing, a pale blue light coming up from the opening, and standing next to the well was a figure. I couldn't make out details, just a silhouette against that blue light. It was facing my direction. Ryan, please come help me. It wasn't my brother. My brother had never called me Ryan. He'd called me Rye since we were kids. This thing, whatever it was, didn't know that. It was copying his voice, but didn't know the details. I grabbed my pack, didn't bother with the tent, just took my essentials and started walking. Away from the well, away from that glowing light and the thing standing next to it. I used my compass to navigate, didn't trust my sense of direction in the dark. Behind me, I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crunching through leaves, keeping pace with me. And the voice kept calling, cycling through different people. My mother, my ex-girlfriend, my old boss, people it couldn't possibly know about. I walked for 3 hours before I saw the fence line that marked the edge of the property. Climbed over it, kept going until I hit the access road. Didn't stop until I reached my truck. I called Mrs. Calloway from the road, told her I'd completed about 60% of the assessment but needed to stop due to equipment issues. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Did you go near the well?" I admitted I had. "Did it call to you?" I didn't answer. "My husband heard his mother," she said. "That's why he never went back. That's why we never sold the land. Who lets someone buy property with that on it?" She told me the story. In 1871, a man named Samuel Weaver killed his family, his wife and 3 children, and threw their bodies down that well. Then he climbed in himself. When they found him, days later, he was still alive somehow. He'd survived the fall, survived the cold and the dark, but when they pulled him up, he wasn't right anymore. Kept screaming about voices, about something down there that promised him things. They hanged him for the murders. But before he died, he said the voices would never stop, that the well would keep calling and eventually someone would answer. Mrs. Calloway said they'd locked it in 1967, but the lock had been broken twice. Both times, the property owner at the time had disappeared. They'd replaced the lock, made it stronger, but she said it didn't matter. The well didn't need to be opened to call people. I finished the call and drove home. Filed a report that the property wasn't suitable for logging due to difficult terrain. Mrs. Calloway never asked for clarification. But 3 weeks ago, I got a voicemail on my work phone. No name, no number. Just a voice, my voice, saying, "Ryan, I need you to come back. I need your help." I deleted it. But I keep thinking about that well, about the blue light and the thing standing beside it, and I wonder how many people have heard their loved ones calling from that darkness. How many have answered? Last week, I found a stone in my driveway. Small, flat, with words carved into it. "Forgive us." I don't know who left it, but I think something followed me home from that forest. And one of these nights, I'm going to hear my brother's voice again, and I'm not sure I'll be strong enough to ignore it. Story 7. My girlfriend Paige inherited a cabin in Sullivan County from an uncle she barely remembered. He'd been a hermit, lived off the grid for 30 years, and when he died, the property went to her because she was the only relative who bothered to visit him. Once, when she was 12. We drove up in mid-November to figure out what to do with it. The drive took forever, back roads that got progressively worse until we were basically on a hiking trail pretending to be a driveway. The cabin appeared through the trees, and my first thought was that it looked wrong. Not dilapidated or creepy in an obvious way. Just positioned wrong. Like it had been built in a spot where no structure should be. It was small, maybe 600 square feet, with a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The windows were dark, the door was locked, and it took us 20 minutes to find the key under a rock where Paige's mother said it would be. Inside smelled like wood smoke and old coffee. There was a fireplace, a narrow bed, a table, 2 chairs. Basic kitchen in one corner. No electricity, no running water. Her uncle had lived here with just a wood stove and kerosene lamps. Paige started going through his things while I checked the structure. The cabin was solid, well maintained, but there were things that bothered me. All the windows had shutters on the inside, heavy wood panels that could be latched shut. There were scratch marks on them, deep gouges like something had been trying to get through. "Paige, look at this." She came over, saw the marks. Her face went pale. What could do that? I didn't have an answer. We kept exploring. Under the bed I found a box. Inside were journals. Dozens of them filled with her uncle's handwriting. Paige started reading, and I saw her expression change from curious to disturbed. "Listen to this," she said. "Day 87. It called to me again last night. Used Jennifer's voice. I almost opened the door. I can't let it in. I can't." There were pages and pages like that. References to something outside, something that called to him using voices of people he'd known. He wrote about rules he'd made for himself. Never open the door after dark. Never look out the windows at night. Keep the shutters closed. If it speaks, don't respond. The most recent entry was dated 3 days before he died. I'm too old for this anymore. I think I know what's going to happen. If someone finds this, do not stay here after sunset. Do not listen if it calls to you. It knows everything about you. It will use it. Paige wanted to leave immediately. I was inclined to agree, but the sun was already setting, and neither of us wanted to navigate that terrible driveway in the dark. We'd stay the night, leave at first light. We closed all the shutters. Started a fire, made dinner from the canned goods in the cupboard. For a while, it felt almost cozy. Then the sun went down completely, and the cabin got very quiet. The knocking started at 9 p.m. Soft at first, almost polite. Tap, tap, tap on the door. Then a voice. "Paige, it's Uncle Robert. I'm sorry I forgot my key. Can you let me in?" Paige grabbed my arm. Uncle Robert was the one who'd left her the cabin. He'd been dead for 2 weeks. "Paige, honey, I'm cold. Please open the door." The voice was perfect. The same gravelly tone, the same slight wheeze. If I hadn't known he was dead, I would have believed it was him. We didn't respond. The knocking continued. Then it moved to the windows, circling the cabin. Tap, tap, tap on each shutter. And the voice kept talking, sometimes from the door, sometimes from the windows. Like whatever it was could be in multiple places at once. "I know you're in there. I just want to talk. 5 minutes, that's all." Paige was crying silently. I held her, my back against the wall, staring at the shutters and expecting them to burst open. Then the voice changed. It was my mother now. "Sweetie, it's Mom. Are you okay? Your father and I are worried. Let us in." My mother was alive and well in Allentown, but hearing her voice, full of concern and love, made something in my chest ache. I felt myself starting to stand, starting to move toward the door. Paige pulled me back. "It's not her," she whispered. "It's not real." The voice cycled through people. My father, my sister, Paige's mother, friends from college, each voice perfect, each one begging to be let in. And between the voices, I could hear something else. Breathing, heavy and wet like something with lungs that didn't work right. Around midnight, something hit the door, hard. The whole frame shook. Then again, and again, it was trying to break in. I grabbed a fireplace poker. Paige grabbed a kitchen knife. We stood there, armed with things that felt useless, while something threw itself against the door. The wood held, but I could see it bowing with each impact. Then it stopped. Complete silence. We waited. 1 minute. 5. 10. Nothing. Then I heard scratching, not on the door or windows, on the roof. Slow, deliberate, moving across the ceiling, back and forth, and with it, a sound like something dragging itself. Something heavy. "What is it?" Paige whispered. I didn't know, but I could track its movement across the ceiling. It was circling, looking for a way in. The chimney, I thought suddenly. The fireplace. I ran to it, grabbed the iron grate that was leaning against the wall, and shoved it into the fireplace opening. Not perfect, but better than nothing. Just in time. Something dropped down the chimney. I heard it hit the grate, heard it scrabble against the metal. Through the gaps, I could see something pale. An arm, too long, fingers ending in broken nails. It reached through, grasping blindly. I backed away. The arm withdrew. And then, from up the chimney, came a voice. My voice. "Paige, it's okay. I got it open. Come here, I need your help." Paige looked at me, at the real me standing across the room. Her face was white. "That's not you," she said, like she was trying to convince herself. "Paige, please. I'm hurt. I need you." It used my voice for maybe 5 minutes. trying every variation. Hurt, scared, angry, pleading. When that didn't work, it went back to other voices. Her mother, her uncle, people from her childhood. We endured it until dawn. When the sun came up, the sounds stopped. The scratching, the voices, the breathing. Just silence and the crackling of the dying fire. We waited until full daylight before opening the shutters. Looked outside. The ground around the cabin was covered in tracks. Not animal tracks. These looked like handprints pressed into the dirt. Hundreds of them circling the cabin. We didn't pack anything. Just got in the car and drove, not stopping until we hit civilization. Paige put the property up for sale immediately. It took 6 months to find a buyer. Some survivalist who wanted an off-grid retreat. I tried to warn him, told him about the journals, about what we'd experienced. He laughed it off. Said he didn't believe in that kind of thing. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from the Sullivan County Sheriff's Department. They'd found the buyer's truck at the cabin. No sign of him. They asked if I knew anything about the property's history. I told them everything. The deputy listened, took notes. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We found journals in the cabin. Different handwriting, but same content. This buyer, he'd been documenting something. Said it called to him using his daughter's voice. The last entry said he was going to open the door, just to prove there was nothing there. They never found him. The search went on for 2 weeks before they gave up. Paige has nightmares. She wakes up hearing her uncle's voice, begging to be let in. I tell her it was just some animal, some explainable phenomenon, but I don't believe it, and neither does she. Last week I woke up at 3 a.m. to knocking on our apartment door. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but I could hear breathing on the other side, and a voice. My voice. Let me in. I need to come home. We're moving. Not because I think it will help, but because I don't know what else to do, and because every night the knocking gets a little louder. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.